Hello, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? This is Antoinette 70 back at you with another exclusive. This is an article that I actually didn't take me that long to find. So I wanted to get a little bit more in depth with some of the issues of Los Angeles per se. So this is out of looks like a magazine or a housing article. So in 1939, red line map of Los Angeles from the HOLC, a government agency created after the Great Depression. Maps like these were used to deny home financing to non-whites. Essentially, all the neighborhoods discussed in the piece are colored either red or yellow. So it seems as though that this is not only an issue of just people not affording housing, also it's fastly becoming an issue of people of color, Black people, not being able to afford the rents. And so, but this time it's done in a way where whether if you were in a situation before, you could afford to live there, but you just were not permitted to live there. Now you can't afford to live there. And so people are questioning if a lot of this is not only targeting just people that are poor, but a majority of your people that are Black and middle class are dwindling in areas that used to be thriving with people of color. So Los Angeles is quickly becoming a place exclusively for people who are white and wealthy or white and rich. So LA's Black population's declined by 100,000 since 1980s, falling from 13% of the county population to an 8%. So in just a few decades, Hollywood alone saw a displacement of 13,000 Latinx, or Latinos is what they would want to say, between the 2000s and 2010. So being pushed out by rising rents to make way for an upscale redevelopment. And that's what is going on. And that is why a lot of people are homeless. So these are just two of the most eye-popping figures that illustrate a larger point. Los Angeles is increasingly becoming solely accessible to the rich, and to the rich are disproportionately white. So Black and Mexican households have 1 cent for every dollar of wealth held by the average white household, according to the color of wealth in Los Angeles. So we are witnessing a rapid creation of a new geography of segregation and exclusion in Los Angeles, as areas seen as desirable are being purged of those who cannot afford the sky high rents that inevitably follow contagious zone where only wealthy people can afford to live, expanding into areas that have historically been populated by lower income communities of color, predominantly Black and Latino families. What's already happened to Silver Lake and Echo Park is proceeding full stream ahead in places like Crenshaw, South Central, Boyle Heights, and Inglewood. So we're very clear on what exactly I'm talking about. See this map I've made, or actually this person made, and the explanatory captions that show you what has happened. This is the start of what had happened. So these are the areas that have become heavily populated with people who are no longer um, Black and Latino families. And so it's been sort of zoned off so you can see what has gone on. So from the 405 to in between, you see the 10, the 110, all the way over. You see areas like Inglewood, Huntington Park, all of Los Angeles City, and then you see all the way up to West Hollywood and Beverly Hills. Those areas usually were the areas that were where the more wealthier um, people lived, and it was pretty much just designated for that class of individuals. But now, high-rise condominiums, which I will tell you, a lot of those units are empty. A lot of them are empty because you are finding that the average families cannot afford to live in those condominiums. And even the apartments are really expensive. So the orange outline is the contagious area, or yeah, the contiguous area, sorry, being colonized by the rich and the wealthy. I said contagious. It does seem like an epidemic. It seems like an epidemic of wealth proportions. So maybe that's why I was using that. So the shaded region contains historically populated areas that were Black and Latino family communities, and each colored pinpoint represents a neighborhood as follows, starting from the top of the shaded area, which is Echo Park. Silver Lake is purple, downtown's black, the black area that's shaded, and Boyle Heights is the green areas that are shaded in. And so South Central's the yellow, Crenshaw's the red, and Inglewood is the blue areas. And so that's sort of where those areas are dotted out. You can see like a dotted area. There's a purple, black, green, red, and then a blue area. And so it's pretty much where you see that whole black shade. That area has been gentrified with a lot of high-rise condos and apartments that are overpriced. And so some figures related to our housing crisis are well known. LA has 58 billionaires and 58,000 homeless residents. And so that number does not really make a fair number of people in terms of people who are able to afford housing versus people who are now fastly becoming homeless. So rents have become totally detached from the wages, increasing to 32% since 2000, while median incomes have fallen 3% over the same period. As evictions are skyrocketing, Los Angeles was recently voted the #1 site for real estate investment in North America. Lucky for us, LA still has room for rents to rise. So that's pretty much put in a sarcastic manner. But what is less well understood is how the crisis is devastating specific communities of color across LA and changing the spatial apartheid of the region. So this isn't exactly new. The West Side has been almost exclusively white and rich for the last several decades, segregated by race and class. That is, what he's describing here can be seen as an extension of the existing residential pattern, but it's happening rapidly. and on multiple fronts at once. And it must be made clear that this is not a neutral process of the neighborhood change. The winners are the real estate investors in this. And so they pretty much have gotten out of control. And the developers who make hefty profits and the wealthier incomers who get to live out their idealized urban lives. So those losers are the poor residents that already live there, especially the majority that rent. Those that are displaced become homeless or are forced to move far away from their jobs, families, and communities. So this is what has been happening. Those who remain must deal with rising rents, increased racialized policing, and the trauma of watching their community change for the benefit of outside people who've never really been in these communities. Just newly coming into the communities because of the rising rents, and they can afford the high rents because they make a lot of money and versus the average families. So the negative health effects of the displacement and financial strain that come with gentrification are well documented. Now, they go into some detail on several different neighborhoods to give us a quick look at how this is happening with links for further reading. So South Central, a majority of Black, or what was a majority of Black in the immediate post-war period, has more recently in the 1990s become a majority Latino. So it changed. So the majority is Latino. These days, its population is 87% Latino and 10% Black. It is it's the most overcrowded neighborhood in the country and has a poverty rate of 45%. 8 in 10 residents are renters. Of those who rent, almost 70% are forced to spend more than 30% of their income on sheltering. So clearly, most of the locals who have a very difficult time handling a rent increase living there. But that's exactly what has happened in recent years, and the rent increases are expected to accelerate, which they have. So even further in the immediate future. And so this was before this article. This was pretty much laying out a blueprint of what is happening now. So the continued expansion of the USC and high-profile mega developments like the 1.2 billion luxury apartment project called The Reef, South Central's proximity to the LA Metro Blue Line, the years of disinvestment that have resulted in cheap land, all combined to make this downtown adjacent neighborhood a perfect target for real estate speculation. Okay, so betting on rising property values and trendy white folk. So South Central already experienced 44% increase in homelessness. Okay, so that's why we have a larger population of homeless people because of the increases in the rent and the unaffordability. So in 2015, 16 alone, in 016 alone. So a report published by Human Impact Partners jointly with several other organizations estimated 4,445 renters within a half mile of the Reef development face a high or very high risk of displacement by the project, and an additional 39,311 renters within 2 mile face a moderate risk. Fortunately, there are groups like Strategic Actions for a Just Economy and Unidad, which are struggling against this every day. And so check out the article by Sahara Sulayman So if I pronounced that wrong, sorry for that. From Streets Blog LA, a report mentioned above, if you want to read about South Central in the greater depth. But Crenshaw, including Baldwin Hills, Leimert Park, Ladera Heights, these were largely Black communities as well, but also Baldwin Hills, Leimert Park, and Ladera Heights were like the middle class or upper middle class Black neighborhoods. The population of Crenshaw is overwhelmingly Black. Roughly 7 in 10 residents rent. Nearby Ladera Heights is referred to as Black Beverly Hills, which were the higher income earners of Black people, which remains a majority Black, relatively wealthy neighborhood. But the median income, again, in the majority of the census tract in the area overall ranged from 20,000 to 40,000. So in 2015, the income needed to afford the average market rate unit in LA was 105,000 a year. So that puts a strain on people who, if they're just making 20 to 40,000, you probably would have problems affording that area now today for sure. Doubled, it says it had doubled since 2015. So, or even quadrupled what most families would make. So, in a win for the homeowners, but a big loss for a majority of renter population. Property value had jumped by 40% in just a few years, and the rents along with them. So, the major process fueling the speculation is the construction of Crenshaw Light Rail Line, and that is still underway right now to this day. I've driven past it and I've seen it. They're still working on that line, which will connect the area for both downtown and LAX. And some of the lines are up. There's one they're still working on as of now, and it's a big project, but there's also the proposed redevelopment of Crenshaw Mall by a Chicago-based company looking to add 1,000 market rate read luxury housing units, 400 hotel rooms, in addition to several other upscale projects planned along the Metro line that represent a further surge of investment and are a good indication of the gentrification that is to come. And that is what is underway right now. Residents and Black owned businesses have already been struggling against displacement for several years. So if you go along the Crenshaw area, you'll see a lot of businesses that are now abandoned because they couldn't afford to stay there, or they sold their business because someone or investor offered them money that they felt they could not refuse, of course. So residents and Black owned businesses have already been struggling against displacement for several years now. There's every reason to expect this will continue apace as the transit line is completed, set for 2019, which is fastly approaching. Crenshaw Subway Coalition, led by Goodman, is currently organizing against the mall redevelopment project. But I don't know if that really worked out, because I see that it's full speed ahead for 2019 on their developments. For further information, you can read the analysis there, in addition to another great piece by Sahara Suleiman. So in Boyle Heights, it was heavily what was Latino, and it was that neighborhood just downtown, east of downtown, in which was 7 in 10 residents were renters. The median income is 33,235, and over 9,000 households there earned only 20,000 a year. And so, having witnessed the destruction of thousands of affordable and rent control units in recent decades, Boyle Heights took a hit. Is one of the primary fronts for the anti-gentrification struggle in LA and really across the country, as radical protests have been staged to prevent white-owned art galleries from moving in ahead of real estate speculators looking to label Boyle Heights as part of the up and coming arts district. So that's what had been happening with that area, pushing out Latino families as well. Between 2010 and 2016, the median rent in Boyle Heights jumped from around 1,500 to 2,200, a $700 increase in just 6 years. As I write, or the person that wrote this, actual mariachis are being evicted from a building set named Mariachi Crossing, okay? So by B.J. Turner, the property owner, for the explicit purpose of making way for wealthier tenants. So it's not only pushing out Black families, it's pushing out Latino families as well on a high-paced scale. So Boyle Heights Alliance Against Displacement, which was BHAAD, a coalition made up of groups such as Defend Boyle Heights, Union de Vecinos. So, and the East Side Local of Los Angeles Tenants Unit, which was LATU, has been organizing against this for a while. For more details, there's several analysis on BHAAD on the situation there. So if you look it up, now Inglewood area was heavily a Black populated neighborhood since the 1960s and has more recently become roughly half Latino. So considered a haven for Black middle class at the time, it's slightly wealthier than the other neighborhoods mentioned there earlier above. Nonetheless, there's good reason to become concerned about displacement on a massive scale, as over 10,000 households earn $20,000 a year and 6 in 10 residents are renters. Inglewood real estate is considered a very hot right now, which you'd already know if you'd watched a show called Insecure. The average selling price for an Inglewood apartment has also doubled since 2012, while average rents have increased from $1,000 to $1,350. So over the same period. So it's a prime spot for real estate speculation because of the pretty close to many jobs. It's pretty close to many jobs on the west side, and the $2 billion NFL stadium project, in addition to the renovation of the Forum and the construction of the Crenshaw LAX light rail line, are also sure signals that Inglewood is being primed for wealthier yuppie residents. So Uplift Inglewood has been organizing steadily to protect residents from displacement, to uplift, not uproot, in their words, people who have lived there all their lives. There's also a good episode on a podcast, There Goes the Neighborhood, about gentrification in Inglewood. And so I don't know if that still exists, but finally, the quick caveat regarding the arguments there. Mapping and tracking displacement and demographics changes is a very tricky task, especially in a place as big, as diverse as LA. So it says that this person said they're not prepared to defend the claim that all of Los Angeles City or County is becoming exclusively rich and white. At the time, this is what they were saying, but it's sure looking like that. And this is further complicated by the fact that many people of color do actually have enough money to live wherever they please. That's what they said then. But that's not what's being reflected in today's time. We're seeing lots of people of color that are displaced move further out, or if they're still in the area, they're homeless or they're just struggling to pay the rent. So I also do not mean that person that wrote this says to erase the different Asian Pacific Islander communities of LA as well. But these communities are outside the area of expertise. So it said that, apologies, well, I'll say this in terms of the Asian communities, the ones that have owned businesses have thrived really relatively well and are able, some are able to afford the higher rents. Now, maybe people who are on the lower income scale are also included in either not being able to afford or ending up, struggling to pay the rents or being displaced. Not a lot of times, if they're um, um, doing well, a lot of times it's because they're business owners or they're a person that is invested in some kind of uh, company, or they may be merchants that have worked for many years and they've accumulated a lot of wealth over the years because there's a lot of property and a lot of businesses that are still owned by Asian or Korean owners, or people in the Asian community, that I can say that I've seen for the most part. Um, so this article, I'm going to go back up here. And so this was pretty much a map of the gentrification that was to come. And so this was sort of a prediction. This was back in like November 2017. And so it is full scale, full speed ahead. This was like the old map when they were doing segregating. And so I'll read under here. In 1939, neighborhoods were redlined, and the red line map of LA, it was to keep blacks or people of color out of neighborhoods, even if you could afford it. Now it's different. The red areas, you see, there's red areas, there's yellow areas, there's green areas, and so essentially all the neighborhoods discussed that I just talked about. And so now it's either you can afford it or you can't afford it. And most of the people that are being pushed out seem to be or have largely been families that are Black and families that are Hispanic, Latino families. So this article pretty much is a pinpoint of what has been going on in the greater cities of Los Angeles area. And so it is up for discussion. It has been for some time now. And so I'm going to leave this article. With that being said, thanks for listening. Like, comment, subscribe, and thank you for listening. And I will leave it on this map right here for a minute. And then that was an old map of when they would segregate neighborhoods, red line neighborhoods in the 1939. And then this is a map of what is happening right now with the gentrification, and it has actually spread it like wildfire. And so you can see the dotted areas where they're colored off, where in shaded area where there's a lot of development, gentrification that has gone underway, rapid pace. So with that being said, thanks for listening.